The Velcor Dominion had finally won. At least that was what they believed. For 10 long years the galaxy had burned under the light of war. Entire planets turned to ash. Cities were reduced to dust. The coalition of worlds, a union of smaller species that dared to resist Velcor rule, had been crushed system by system. And now, at last, the final stronghold of the coalition had fallen, the planet Rathan Prime. The Velcor commander, Grand Marshal Sareth Vorn, stood on the bridge of his flagship Imperion's Fang as his fleet circled the smoking planet below. The sight filled him with pride and a cold satisfaction. His golden eyes reflected the fires that still burned in Rathan's shattered cities. "Signal to all ships," he said, his voice steady and proud. "Victory is ours. The coalition is no more." The Dominion reigned supreme across the stars. The bridge erupted with cheers. Officers raised their fists in triumph. Across the fleet, soldiers shouted and celebrated through the comm channels. For generations, the Velcor had sought this. Complete domination, the end of all resistance. Sareth allowed himself a thin smile. "Transmit the declaration of victory to every world. Let the galaxy know that no power can stand against the Dominion." The communications officer obeyed, her claws moving quickly across the glowing console. Across hundreds of star systems, the Velcor symbol, a crimson sun over black space, flashed on millions of screens. Their anthem thundered across public channels, but deep inside the wreckage of Rathan Prime, a faint signal still pulsed. It was weak, almost broken, hidden beneath the ruins of an orbital tower. The source was an old communication relay cracked and half buried in the debris. The signal carried a simple message, an automated distress code set by one of the last coalition outposts. It was not directed toward any known ally. It was sent into deep, uncharted space. No one in the Velcor fleet noticed. Their systems were too focused on broadcasting victory to hear the quiet cry for help. Days passed. The celebrations grew larger. Velcor media filled the networks with endless stories of glory, the grandest triumph in history. But for some reason, unease began to ripple through the military. Strange reports arrived from the outer watchposts. Unknown signals had been detected far beyond the Dominion's borders. Faint, rhythmic, and unlike any known pattern. At first, commanders dismissed them as ghost echoes, leftover transmissions from the war. But the signals kept repeating, and they were moving closer. In a dark command chamber deep within the Dominion's capital, a small group of scientists gathered before a holographic display. "This is the pattern," said Dr. Lethra, a signal analyst. The image of a pulsing waveform shimmered in the air. "It repeats every 20 seconds. "It's not random." Sareth Vorn entered the chamber, his presence filling the room. "You called me from victory briefings for a ghost signal?" Dr. Lethra hesitated. "With respect, Grand Marshal, this is not a ghost. We've traced the source to a region of space that is unregistered. It's from a sector outside all mapped territories." Sareth frowned. "Show me." The hologram zoomed out, displaying a map of the galaxy. At the very edge, past the outer rim of known civilization, a small blinking dot pulsed. "There," Lethra whispered. The signal came from that direction. "And Grand Marshal, we intercepted a reply." The room fell silent. "A reply?" Sareth repeated slowly. "From whom?" Lethra looked uneasy. "We don't know. The reply came with an encryption we can't break. It's unlike anything we've ever seen. It carries energy readings beyond our understanding." The Grand Marshal stared at the map. "How far away?" "Approximately 3 standard jumps," the scientist replied. "Whoever they are coming." 3 days later, in the Velcor frontier system of Mirren Gate, the watch station Vigil's eye detected movement. Captain Dren Mailer leaned forward as the radar lit up with new contacts. "Report," he barked. "Unknown vessels, sir, multiple. They're dropping out of hyperspace, all around us." On the central display, dozens of ships appeared. Their designs were sleek, geometric, and silver gray. They did not match any known database. There were no markings, no banners, no visible weapons. "Open a channel," Dren ordered. "Identify yourselves. This is Velcor space." No reply. The unknown ships continued to move, silently, precisely, in perfect formation. "Are they charging weapons?" "Negative," said the sensor officer. "No power spikes detected. But, sir, their energy readings are off the charts. I've never seen anything like it." A strange quiet filled the command center. The alien ships moved closer, their engines glowing softly like blue fire. "Sir," said the communications officer, voice trembling. "They're transmitting something now." "What language?" "It's not any language. It's an image. A symbol." The screen flickered. A single symbol appeared. A white circle with a blue background. Inside the circle, a small planet with a single moon. Dren's eyes narrowed. "Translate." The computer processed for a few seconds before displaying the word Earth. No one on the station understood it. No one had ever heard of such a world. Before Dren could issue another command, the unknown fleet moved again. This time, the space around them shimmered. Hundreds of smaller craft appeared, surrounding the Velcor station like a steel storm. "Activate shields." Too late, the lights flickered. Systems failed one by one. The screens went black, then white. The ship's power core shut down completely without any explosion or sound. The captain tried to speak, but his voice vanished into static, and then, for the first time, the human spoke. The message came in perfect Velcor language, translated automatically into every channel. "This sector is under humanitarian recovery protocol. Do not interfere." The voice was calm. Female. Controlled. Dren felt a chill down his spine. "Humanitarian? Who are you?" No answer. Moments later, the human ships moved again, descending toward Rathan Prime, the very planet where the Velcor had celebrated their victory. Back on the Empyrean's Fang, Sareth Vorn watched the data feed in disbelief. The human fleet had arrived without firing a single shot, and yet every Velcor system near Rathan Prime was now disabled. Their weapons didn't work. Their engines were frozen. Communications were jammed. "Impossible," Sareth whispered. "No one has that kind of power." A lieutenant turned from her console, her face pale. "Grand Marshal, we've received a transmission. It's directed to all Velcor commanders. Play it." A hologram appeared. A woman in a gray uniform with a silver insignia on her shoulder. Her expression was calm, her eyes sharp and steady. "This is Admiral Kara Holt of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet," she said. "We received a distress signal from this region. We are here to provide assistance and ensure peace." Sareth stepped closer to the projection. "You interfere in Dominion matters, human. This is our territory. Leave at once." The Admiral's image remained unchanged. "We do not claim territory," she replied. "We claim responsibility. Your war ended lives, and not just your enemies, but your own people's. Stand down. Our medics and engineers will begin recovery immediately." The Velcor bridge crew stared at the projection, frozen. "Recovery?" Sareth said bitterly. "You mean occupation?" Admiral Holt's eyes seemed to look directly at him. "Occupation is when you conquer. Recovery is when you care enough to rebuild what others destroyed." The transmission ended. Outside, the human ships moved with eerie silence. They began collecting survivors from both sides, Velcor and Coalition alike. Their drones floated through debris fields, bringing bodies into containment pods, identifying them, and treating the injured. Not a single weapon was fired. Sareth watched through the viewport, his pride cracking for the first time. He had seen many species in his years of war, fierce, cruel, proud, but never one that carried such power without boasting, such strength without hate. He turned to his officers. "Do not engage them. Observe only." As hours passed, the Velcor crew watched in disbelief as the Terrans restored power to broken ships, sent food to starving colonies, and stabilized planetary orbits that had been damaged by the war. The Velcor's greatest victory was becoming meaningless before their eyes. Far above Rathan Prime, the Terran flagship Unity floated in silence. Inside, Admiral Kara Holt stood before a holographic map of the system. Her officers awaited orders. "Status?" she asked quietly. "All enemy systems disabled. No casualties. Recovery in progress." "Good." She looked at the burning planet below. "Record this in the log," she said. "Operation Dawn response complete." The officer nodded. "And the Velcor, Admiral? They're watching us closely." Holt gave a small nod. "Let them. The galaxy will learn what humanity does when the war is over." Outside, the stars burned quietly, reflecting in her eyes. Calm, determined, unshaken. Humanity had stepped onto the battlefield not as conquerors, but as the keepers of peace. And somewhere deep in the galaxy, countless worlds began to whisper a new name: humans. The species that came after victory, The galaxy had seen countless wars. It had witnessed the rise and fall of empires and the screams of dying worlds. But what it had never seen, not even in its oldest records, was a fleet like the Terran Expeditionary Force. They arrived not in chaos, but in orderly silence. Their ships appeared out of hyperspace like a curtain of silver light spreading across the stars. There were no banners, no war cries, no warnings, only purpose. Each vessel was crafted with smooth, angular armor that reflected the light of nearby suns. They looked less like warships and more like moving cities, calm, deliberate, and graceful. At their center moved the largest of them all, the TSS Unity, flagship of Admiral Kara Holt. Inside, the Admiral stood on the command bridge, surrounded by soft blue lights and a team of officers working quietly at their stations. There was no shouting, no panic, no rush. Every command was given with calm precision. "Report status," Holt said. "Fleet position confirmed. All recovery drones deployed. Medical cruisers have begun descent to HFY," replied Commander Leon, her second-in-command. Holt's eyes were fixed on the holographic map showing the Velcor Dominion fleet. Thousands of enemy ships surrounded the planet, but every one of them was motionless, powerless, and harmless. They had been disabled, not destroyed. That was how humans fought now. Not to kill, but to stop others from killing. On the surface of HFY, chaos had turned to confusion. The Velcor troops who had survived the last battle watched as hundreds of human drones descended from the skies. Instead of attacking, they started repairing the broken machines, extinguishing fires, and building emergency shelters. From the ruins, civilians, Velcor, Coalition, even prisoners of war stared in disbelief. The drones worked fast, almost silently, glowing with blue energy as they lifted debris and treated the wounded. Among the survivors was a Velcor soldier named Reen Kyle. He had fought in dozens of battles and had seen cruelty on every front. But now, as he watched human medics treat even the Velcor wounded, he couldn't understand. "Why?" he asked aloud. "Why would they help us?" No one answered. Moments later, one of the drones projected a soft voice, calm and clear in Velcor language. "Remain calm. Medical aid is being provided. No harm will come to you." Reen's heart pounded as he realized the voice came from orbit, from the Terran flagship itself. He looked to the sky, where the human fleet hung above the clouds like silent guardians. He whispered, "These are not conquerors." Back in orbit on the Unity, Admiral Holt stood before a wide observation window. Beyond it, the stars glittered, and the Velcor fleet floated motionless, powerless, yet untouched. Her officers waited for her next command. "Admiral," said Commander Leon, "the Velcor are transmitting messages. They demand communication. Should we respond?" Holt shook her head slightly. "Not yet. Let them see what we do before they hear what we say." "Yes, ma'am." She turned to another officer. "Status on recovery?" "All major civilian sectors stabilized. Coalition survivors located in Sector 12. Estimated population 600,000. Begin evacuation," Holt ordered. "Use medical bays 2 through 7. The officer nodded. As the humans worked, one Velcor battleship, the Iron Warden, began to move. Its engines flickered weakly, but it was still functional. On its bridge, Captain Vorental, a proud and stubborn veteran, couldn't accept what was happening. "They think they can ignore us?" he growled. "We are the Dominion. No one enters our space without permission." His second officer hesitated. "Sir, their power is beyond anything we've seen. Perhaps we should—" "Fire a warning shot," Voren ordered. "We'll remind them whose stars these are." The officer obeyed, launching a single plasma burst into space, not at a target, but near one of the Terran ships. It was meant to be harmless, but within seconds every Terran ship shifted formation. The space between them filled with shimmering light, a defensive field so vast it covered the entire area. The plasma bolt vanished instantly, absorbed without a trace. Then the Terran response came. No explosions, no return fire, just a pulse, invisible to the eye but powerful enough to disable every system aboard the Iron Warden. Engines off. Weapons offline. Life support steady. The human fleet had neutralized an entire warship without harming a single life. Captain Voren stood frozen. What are they?" Across the system, the same calm voice echoed through every Velcor communication line. Admiral Holt's voice. "Velcor forces, stand down. You have fired on a humanitarian fleet. We will not retaliate. We are here to rebuild what your war destroyed. Further hostility will result in system lockdown. And then silence. The Velcor officers stared at their darkened consoles. None dared to move. Hours later, the Terrans began landing personnel on Rathan Prime. Their recovery teams moved across the wasteland in armored vehicles that emitted quiet hums. They worked together with machines that looked almost alive. Drones with silver shells and glowing sensors. They found survivors trapped in ruined towers, healed them, and gave them food and shelter. For the first time since the war began, the planet heard no gunfire, only the sound of rebuilding. From his tent on a nearby ridge, Reen Kale watched the humans at work. He saw a group of Terran engineers lift a fallen bridge using beams of blue light. They didn't speak much, but every movement was filled with purpose. One of the humans noticed Reen watching and approached. She removed her helmet, a young woman with steady gray eyes and a small insignia on her uniform. A blue circle with a white planet inside it. "You're Velcor," she said calmly. Reen nodded. "Yes, you're human," she smiled faintly. "That's right. Why are you helping us?" he asked. "We were your enemy. You could destroy us." Her gaze was firm but not unkind. "Because if we destroy you, we become you." Reen blinked, unsure what to say. "Wars end," the human said softly. "But people still need saving. That's what we do." She handed him a ration pack and walked away, leaving Reen staring after her. For the first time in his life, he felt shame and a strange sense of hope. Meanwhile, on the Unity, Admiral Holt reviewed the progress reports. All major zones stabilized, Commander Leon reported. "We've begun atmospheric repairs. The Velcor have stopped transmitting threats." Holt nodded slowly. "Good. They're starting to understand." The Admiral walked to the window, gazing out at the field of stars. "We came here because someone asked for help. But what we found was worse than a cry for aid. We found a species that believes victory means peace. They still have much to learn." Commander Leon glanced at her. "And if they resist?" Holt's expression remained calm. "Then we'll show them that strength isn't about control. It's about restraint." In the Velcor capital, the High Council received word of the humans' arrival. Panic spread through their chambers. The images showed Terran ships surrounding their borders. Not invading, but patrolling peacefully, ensuring no new wars began. "What do they want?" one counselor asked nervously. "Resources? Territory?" another guessed. But the answer came through a single message broadcast to every Velcor channel. Translated perfectly. "We ask for nothing. We only ask you to stop." The council fell silent. No demands, no tribute, no threats, just peace. Back on Rathan Prime, the nights had grown quiet. The stars reflected in the broken rivers and the newly built shelters glowed softly in the darkness. Reen Kale stood with a group of other Velcor soldiers, watching the human engineers work. The humans never raised their voices, never argued, and never stopped. It was strange and to see such power used not for conquest, but for care. He looked up and saw the Unity high above, a silver shadow among the stars. "Maybe," he whispered. Our victory ended the moment they arrived. Far above, Admiral Holt stood on her bridge, her reflection shining faintly in the glass. She placed her hands behind her back and spoke quietly to her crew. "We'll finish recovery and move to the next system. Every world that suffered in this war deserves to heal." "Yes, Admiral," replied her officers. As the fleet prepared for its next move, Holt allowed herself a rare thought, one she never spoke aloud. She had seen war destroy countless species. But she had also seen humanity rise from ashes time and again. The galaxy didn't yet understand. The humans weren't a new empire. They were the balance that came after chaos. As the Unity drifted through the calm of space, her engines glowed softly, painting the void with silver light. And for the first time in a long while, the stars over Rathan Prime seemed peaceful again. The stars had gone quiet. After centuries of war, the galaxy didn't know how to handle silence. Planets that once echoed with gunfire now heard only the hum of Terran engines and the calm voices of their workers. The Velcor Dominion, once feared as an unstoppable empire, had been frozen in shock. Their fleets floated powerless near their own worlds. No human had fired a weapon since the day they arrived. Yet the Dominion's entire war machine had been stopped as if by invisible hands, and humanity said nothing. They only worked. On the shattered surface of Rathan Prime, the rebuilding continued. The world that had seen its cities burn now saw new life emerging. Human engineers, dressed in gray and white armor, walked among the ruins with machines that repaired roads, purified air, and rebuilt power grids. Their drones floated above like silver birds, guiding beams of soft blue light that stitched the broken planet together piece by piece. Velcor civilians who had once hidden in fear now watched the humans with quiet wonder. They didn't understand why these strangers helped them. In one of the newly rebuilt sectors, Admiral Kara Holt visited the ground team for the first time. She stepped off her shuttle into a field of blackened soil where once stood a great city. The local air was still smoky, but life had returned. The humans had brought plants that could survive almost anywhere. Green patches grew between the ruins. Commander Leon joined her. "Admiral, reconstruction of the southern district is 70% complete. The people have begun returning to their homes," Holt nodded. "And the Velcor forces?" "They're silent, ma'am. They haven't made a single aggressive move since the Iron Warden incident." "Good," Holt said quietly. She looked across the landscape, where Terran medics treated the wounded under the open sky. "Let the silence teach them." Far above, in orbit, the Velcor fleet remained still. On the flagship Imperion's Fang, Grand Marshal Sareth Vorn sat in his command chair, staring at the human fleet through the viewing window. For years, he had dreamed of power, of being the ruler who brought eternal dominance to the Dominion. But now he saw his empire helpless, not defeated by destruction, but by something far worse: mercy. Admiral Holt. He muttered the name as if it were a mystery. "She holds the power to destroy us, yet she doesn't. Why?" His second officer, Terran Mal, answered carefully. "Perhaps they want something greater than control. Perhaps they want respect." Sareth gave a bitter smile. "Respect is taken, not given." "Not by them, sir," Terran said softly. "They seem to earn it differently." The Grand Marshal said nothing. For the first time in his career, he had no orders to give. Down on Rathan Prime, a Velcor captain named Terran Vel walked through the ruins with a small group of survivors. He had been a soldier all his life, loyal to the Dominion, proud of his victories. But now he watched the humans working and felt confusion instead of pride. A Terran officer approached him, a man named Lieutenant Harris, his armor marked with the blue insignia of Earth. "You are Captain Terran Vel?" Harris asked calmly. "Yes," Terran answered carefully. "And you are?" "Harris." "Terran Fleet. I'm here to check on the reconstruction progress." Terran frowned. "You're rebuilding our cities. You could have destroyed them. Why?" Harris studied the alien captain for a long moment before replying. "Because you already destroyed yourselves. We're just making sure it stops here." The words hit harder than any weapon. Terran lowered his eyes. "You speak as if you know war better than anyone." Harris gave a faint, sad smile. "Humanity's history is made of war, Captain. We've seen what victory without mercy does. We learned the cost long ago. As the days passed, the humans did not demand surrender, payment, or tribute. They only asked for peace. They brought food to the starving. They repaired hospitals and schools. They restored power to Velcor colonies that had been dark for years. Everywhere they went, they left hope. A strange, almost uncomfortable hope. The Dominion's propaganda had always painted humans as primitive creatures from an unimportant world. But now every Velcor broadcast showed images of human compassion and skill. The people began to whisper, "These are not conquerors. These are protectors." In the Velcor capital, the High Council held a secret meeting. Counselor Vetha slammed her fist on the table. "We cannot let this continue. They disable our fleets, they enter our worlds, and they act like guardians. Soon our people will see them as saviors." Another counselor spoke carefully. "Perhaps that is not a bad thing, Vetha. We have ruled through fear for generations." "Maybe." "Silence," Vetha shouted. "They will undo everything we built." But the others remained quiet. Some of them had family on worlds now protected by humans. Some had seen the Terrans save their own wounded soldiers. For the first time, the council didn't agree, and silence filled the chamber. Admiral Holt received a report that evening from her intelligence officers. The Dominion was fracturing, not by human attack, but from within. "Broadcast morale transmission," she ordered. The message spread across all systems, a simple holographic projection of Holt herself. Her voice was calm, clear and steady. People of the Velcor Dominion, this war is over. No one is your enemy anymore. Humanity asks for nothing, they not land, not resources, not allegiance. We ask only that you stop making death a victory. The message repeated across the galaxy. Children heard it in their homes. Soldiers heard it in their bunkers. And even the Grand Marshal heard it on his flagship echoing through empty halls. He turned off the screen and sat alone. For the first time, he wondered if perhaps the humans were not enemies at all, but teachers. Weeks turned to months. The silence deepened. The battlefield of broken stars, once filled with wrecked ships, was now a graveyard of peace. The humans didn't remove the ruins. They turned them into monuments, reminders of what pride and hate had done. Velcor civilians visited these places. They saw human engineers planting banners not of victory, but of remembrance, white flags marked only with a small symbol of Earth. One such visitor was Captain Taran Vel. He stood before the largest monument, a giant piece of shattered alloy shaped into a ring. In its center floated a single inscription written in dozens of languages. Peace is not the absence of war. It is the courage to stop fighting. A Terran officer saw him reading it and approached quietly. "You came back," she said. Taran looked at her. It was Lieutenant Harris's superior, Commander Leon herself. "I wanted to understand," he said simply. "How you can have such power and not use it for domination." Leon smiled gently. "Because we remember what domination cost us. Humanity almost ended once, not from aliens, but from ourselves. We learned mercy the hard way." Taran nodded slowly. "Perhaps we are learning it now." As the months passed, trade began to return between former enemy worlds. Human ships escorted Velcor freighters, ensuring peace in regions that had never known it before. And everywhere the Terrans went, silence followed, not the silence of fear, but of calm. People began to sleep again without alarms. Children played outside without hiding. The war had ended not with an explosion, but with quiet rebuilding. One night aboard the Unity, Admiral Holt looked out at the stars from her private chamber. Commander Leon entered quietly. "Admiral, the Velcor High Council has sent an official message. They wish to open peace talks." Holt smiled faintly. Then our silence spoke louder than our weapons. She turned to the window. Beyond the glass, the stars burned like gentle embers. "They thought silence meant weakness," she said softly. "They never understood. Silence is strength when it brings peace." In the following weeks, the Velcor Dominion began to change. Their people demanded reforms, new leaders, and an end to conquest. The humans did not rule them. They simply watched, guiding quietly, always ready to help, but never to command. And slowly, planet by planet, the Dominion began to rebuild not as an empire, but as a community. The galaxy's great war was finally over. The battlefield that had once divided civilizations was now quiet, a field of stars that belonged to everyone. And in that silence, every world knew one truth. When humanity steps onto the battlefield, the war itself ends. The Velcor Dominion had known fear before, but never like this. Fear used to come in the form of explosions, raids, and planetary sieges. But this fear was different. It was quiet, cold, and thoughtful. It came with the sound of human footsteps echoing in empty corridors once filled with arrogance. Admiral Kara Holt stood on the command deck of her flagship, TNS Resolute, gazing at a holographic map of the Velcor territories. Bright red marks showed where Dominion fleets had fallen, not by human weapons, but by their own decision to surrender. The humans had not needed to destroy them. They had simply shown them a new kind of strength, the kind that came with restraint. On every Velcor world, the same pattern repeated. Human ships entered orbit not to conquer, but to restore. They repaired broken stations, cleared debris, and helped alien refugees who had been abandoned by their own leaders. For the first time in generations, the Velcor people saw ships in their skies that did not bring death. In the capital city of Velcor Prime, Grand Counselor Rhynak watched the human relief teams with silent disbelief. His once proud empire had stood on domination and fear. Now he watched his citizens cheer for those who should have been enemies. He stood in his grand hall staring at the massive windows showing the skyline filled with Terran supply shuttles. "They rebuild what they did not break," he muttered quietly. His advisor, an older alien with trembling hands, nodded. Yes, my lord. And they ask for nothing in return. Only peace, Rhynak frowned. No empire does this. What do they gain? What do they want? No one had an answer. Outside, human engineers worked side by side with Velcor civilians. The humans never acted superior. They taught, explained, and smiled. Simple gestures that felt alien in this world of command and fear. A human medic helped a Velcor child fix a small drone toy. A group of soldiers helped rebuild a water plant that had been destroyed in the war. They never asked about sides or blame. The galaxy began to whisper that the humans were not conquerors. They were something else, something harder to define. Some called them guardians. Others called them judges of fate. Meanwhile, Captain Taranvel, once a proud officer of the Dominion fleet, now worked aboard the TNS Mercy, a Terran medical ship. He had been taken as a prisoner, but the humans had never treated him like one. They had healed his wounds and given him food and a place to stay. When he asked why, the answer had been simple. Because we can, said Dr. Eliza Ward, a calm woman with tired eyes, and because no one else will. Over time, Taranvel had begun to understand the human way of thinking. They did not believe in endless victory or punishment. To them, every life saved was another chance to stop the cycle of destruction. Still, there was something heavy behind their kindness, something born from history. Taranvel once asked Eliza, "How can your people show mercy to those who destroyed your allies?" Eliza smiled softly. "Because we remember what it feels like to be destroyed. We learned that peace is harder than war, but worth more than all the victories in the stars." Taranvel stayed silent. Those words stayed with him. Across the galaxy, the Terran fleet worked like a wave of calm spreading through chaos. They helped planets recover their water systems, restored power grids, and treated sicknesses left from the war. But everywhere they went, they also found hidden truths, proof of what the Velcor Dominion had done in their years of rule. Admiral Holt stood in a dark room on the ship TNS Justice, reviewing a collection of holo-recordings taken from Dominion archives. The files showed what had been done to the Coalition worlds that had begged for help before the humans arrived. Starvation, slavery, forced labor. She said nothing as the recordings played. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes told another story. When her officers asked what to do with the evidence, she gave a single, quiet answer. Release it. The next day, the entire galaxy saw the truth. The revelation hit the Dominion harder than any battle ever could. Citizens began to protest. Soldiers refused to fight for their leaders. Whole planets declared independence, inspired by the humans' example. But the humans didn't use this chance to rule or divide. Instead, they sent diplomats and engineers to stabilize the collapsing systems. "Let them choose their own way," Admiral Holt said. "We will only hold the light so they can see the path." Even as the Dominion fractured, humanity refused to replace it with their own empire. To them, control was not victory. Healing was. That decision confused many alien leaders. Some saw it as weakness. Others, like Taranvel, saw it as something far stronger. On the third month after the fall of the Dominion fleets, Admiral Holt stood before a galactic audience for the first time. Every major species watched the broadcast, the speech that would define humanity's arrival in the stars. She began calmly, her voice steady and soft. "When we came here, we found ruin," she said. "We found lives crushed by war, power built on suffering, and peace traded for pride. We were not here to take revenge or to build an empire. We came because someone called for help. And when humanity hears that call, we answer." The audience watched in silence. Her eyes were clear, her tone firm but kind. "You thought victory was power, but we learned something different long ago. Victory is responsibility. Every world that rises must protect those who cannot. That is what makes strength real." Her speech ended not with cheers but with quiet respect. Across the galaxy, leaders and citizens alike began to think differently about humanity. Not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as a force of balance. Later that evening, Taranvel met Admiral Holt aboard her ship. The human flag and the symbol of peace were displayed behind her, a sign of unity, not domination. "You changed everything," Taranvel said. Without firing more than a few shots, Holt smiled slightly. "We didn't come to change them. We came to remind them." "Remind them of what?" "That every species has a choice," she said. "To destroy or to build. We just showed them what the second one looks like." Terranvel lowered his head respectfully. I understand now. Humanity doesn't fight for power. You fight so no one else has to. That's the goal, Holt replied softly, but it's not always easy to keep. Over the following months, peace slowly returned to the systems once ruled by the Dominion. The humans trained Velcor doctors, shared farming technology, and established education networks across the stars. Children born after the war learned about humans not as enemies, but as allies who arrived when all hope was gone. Some planets built monuments to honor the Terran fleet. They didn't show soldiers with weapons. They showed humans extending their hands, helping others to stand. Terranvel, now a respected ambassador, often spoke to the young about what he witnessed. He told them that true strength was not about how many you could defeat, but how many you could save. They came from far away, he would say, not to conquer, but to remind us that mercy can be the sharpest blade and kindness the strongest shield. Admiral Holt continued her missions quietly, avoiding fame or celebration. She often looked at the stars, remembering the faces of the fallen, human and alien alike. To her, the mission was never about glory. It was about balance. One evening, as her ship passed over the rebuilt world of Velcor Prime, she received a message from Rhynak, the former Grand Counselor. He had surrendered and was now living a quiet life, helping rebuild his people's culture. His message read, "You could have destroyed us. Instead, you gave us back our souls. For that, we will never forget humanity." Holt read the message silently, then closed the screen. Her reply was simple. "We only reminded you of what you always had." As the stars passed outside the viewport, she spoke softly to her crew. "People think we end wars," she said. "But that's not what we do. We give the galaxy a reason not to start them again." Her crew nodded in silence. The Resolute continued forward, leaving light trails across the dark sky, a symbol of hope in the void. Because wherever humanity went, they didn't just fight. They built.
They healed.
They reminded the universe that compassion was not weakness. It was the strongest force of all. The galaxy had changed. It was no longer the same place that had seen endless wars, burned planets, and shattered empires. Humanity had stepped onto the battlefield, not with weapons to conquer, but with hands to rebuild, minds to guide, and hearts to inspire. On Wraithen Prime, the once destroyed cities now glimmered under twin suns. Roads were rebuilt, rivers cleaned, and parks planted where smoke had once filled the skies. Children laughed in the streets as human engineers worked side by side with Velcor citizens. The humans did not demand tribute or recognition. They offered guidance and left control in the hands of the people who lived there. In a quiet field overlooking the city, Captain Terranvel watched the new world being born. The child of a former enemy, he had once believed humans were too distant to care, too proud to act for anything but themselves. Now he understood. "They came to show us what we could be," he whispered to himself. Beside him, a group of Velcor children laughed as they ran through the green fields. Their uniforms, once dull and gray, were now bright with colors, stitched from materials provided by human aid. "They don't just rebuild," Terranvel continued softly. "They teach hope." Above Wraithen Prime, the Terran fleet moved silently. Ships patrolled the skies not as enforcers but as guardians. Their engines glowed softly, a calm light that reflected in every world below. Among them, Admiral Kara Holt stood aboard the flagship Unity, watching her crews coordinate reconstruction and medical relief. Commander Leon approached. "Admiral, all sectors are operational. Velcor Prime has begun establishing local governance. No more fighting. No more fear," Holt nodded. "Good, let the people lead." "We only guide," Leon hesitated. "And the rest of the Dominion?" "They will follow," Holt said quietly. "They already are. Mercy is a language stronger than fear." Her eyes drifted toward the stars. Beyond them, countless worlds had begun sending messages of gratitude, curiosity, and cautious hope. Humanity's presence was quiet but undeniable. For the first time, the galaxy understood that humans did not conquer to gain power. They entered conflicts to restore balance. On Velcor Prime, the former High Council had dissolved. Counselor Rhynak, now working alongside humans to rebuild schools and hospitals, looked out at the city's new skyline. He saw humans and Velcor citizens working together, sharing knowledge and skills. "This is more than reconstruction. he said to a human officer beside him. "This is a lesson in what leadership could be." Lieutenant Harris nodded. "We don't impose. We show what is possible. They choose the rest." Rinnock thought of the years spent ruling through fear, the lives lost, the cities destroyed. He lowered his head. "I cannot unmake the past," he said softly. "But perhaps we can shape the future." The officer smiled. "That is the only victory that matters." Across the galaxy, the story was the same. Worlds that had suffered under Dominion rule were thriving. Humans had helped establish networks for communication, trade, and healthcare. They had repaired starports, reconnected transportation systems, and even planted forests on barren moons. Yet in all this, they never stayed to rule. Their presence was always temporary. They left the decision-making to the people they helped. Humanity had no desire to conquer, only to guide and inspire. On one small colony, a child asked his mother, "Will the humans come back?" His mother smiled. "They will only if we call them. But their gift is ours to keep. The choice to be better is ours now." On Rathan Prime, Captain Taranvel stood before a large memorial in the city center. It had been erected not to honor victory, but to honor peace. The monument was a simple ring of alloy, engraved with words in multiple languages. Peace is not the absence of war. It is the courage to build instead of destroy. Taranvel ran his hand along the smooth metal. He thought of Admiral Holt, of the Terran fleet, of every human who had stepped into the galaxy not to conquer, but to remind others of what they could become. "You changed everything," he whispered. A human engineer, young and smiling, approached. "We only showed the way," she said. "You did the rest," Taranvel nodded. "Then the galaxy has learned something new. Strength without mercy is nothing. But strength with purpose, that is everything." In orbit, Admiral Holt received a final transmission from the Velcor survivors. It was a message of gratitude, but also of resolve. "Humanity has shown us what we can be," the Velcor speaker said. "We will never forget. We will never return to the ways of fear and conquest. We will build as you have shown us." Holt allowed herself a small, rare smile. "Then the work is done. Now the galaxy chooses its own path." She turned to her crew. "Prepare to depart. Other systems call for our aid. We do not conquer, we guide. And every world we touch must remember that lesson." The crew nodded silently. Their ships gleamed under the starlight, engines glowing softly as they formed into formation. As the Terran fleet moved away, children on Rathan Prime waved. Adults bowed their heads in respect. Even the former Velcor soldiers, once proud and unyielding, stood quietly, acknowledging the humans who had changed everything without firing a single shot. Taranvel watched the fleet disappear into hyperspace. "Perhaps this is what the stars have waited for," he said softly. "A force that fights not to win but to teach." He turned back to the city below, alive and vibrant for the first time in decades. The roads were busy with merchants. Parks were filled with children. Schools were open, full of learning and laughter. The war was over, truly over. Far away, Admiral Holt looked at the stars from the Bridge of Unity. She spoke quietly to herself, though her crew could hear. "They thought they had won," she said. "But the war doesn't end with victory. It ends with the courage to rebuild, the courage to save, the courage to hope. Humanity doesn't step onto the battlefield to conquer. We step onto it to change it." The stars stretched endlessly before her. For the first time, the galaxy seemed calm, as if it too understood the lesson. And in that calm, every world knew one truth. Humanity was not just strong. Humanity was the balance that came after chaos. The humans did not linger. They left behind knowledge, medicine, technology, and most importantly, a reminder. Power is nothing without responsibility. Victory is nothing without mercy. And a species that chooses peace is the strongest of all. As the Unity and her fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving Rathan Prime and countless other worlds in peace, Taranvel whispered one final thought. The galaxy will never be the same. Humanity has arrived, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as guardians of hope, and that is the greatest victory of all. The stars shone brighter that night, reflecting the new dawn across a galaxy that had learned a truth too long forgotten. When humanity steps onto the battlefield, the war itself changes.